My parents drained my college fund to pay for my brother's gambling debts and told me to be a good sister. I silently moved out and got a scholarship. Now they're bankrupt and living in their car. 7 days before I was supposed to leave for Penn State, 7 days before everything I'd worked for since freshman year was supposed to begin, my dad called a family meeting in our living room. The energy was weird from the start. Mom kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, that nervous habit she does when she's about to deliver bad news. Jake wouldn't make eye contact, just stared at his Jordans like they held the secrets of the universe. Dad cleared his throat 3 times. Before speaking, always a bad sign. "Sam," he finally said, looking at some point above my head rather than at me. "We need to talk about your college fund." My stomach dropped instantly. The college fund. My $120,000 safety net. The money my grandparents had started for me when I was born, that my parents had been adding to since I was in diapers. The fund that was going to cover my 4 years at Penn State, where I'd already been accepted, already picked my dorm, already selected my classes. "What about it?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. Dad glanced at Mom, who suddenly found her cuticles fascinating. "We've had to reallocate those funds." Reallocate. Such a clean corporate word for what I was about to learn was straight-up theft. "Jake's had some financial difficulties." Mom jumped in, finally looking up. "He needed help, and as family, we help each other." She reached over and squeezed Jake's shoulder. He still wouldn't look at me. I sat there, trying to process. What kind of financial difficulties cost $120,000? The silence that followed was deafening until Jake mumbled, "I got in over my head with some guys in Atlantic City. Gambling. My college fund was gone because my 23-year-old brother couldn't stay away from blackjack tables." "All of it?" My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. "You took all of it?" Dad straightened his shoulders, shifting from apologetic to defensive in a heartbeat. "We didn't have a choice, Sam. These weren't the kind of people you can negotiate with. They were threatening Jake. But what about me? What about Penn State? I'm supposed to leave next week." Mom's face hardened in that way that always made me feel 2 inches tall. "This is why we're telling you now. You'll need to defer for a year, maybe 2, until we can figure something out." "Figure something out?" I echoed, disbelief making my voice crack. "Like what? I've worked my ass off for this. I turned down other scholarships because you promised this money was there." "Language," Dad warned, like that was the problem here. "Listen, sometimes in life you have to adjust your plans. Jake needed this. He could have been seriously hurt." I looked at my brother, still examining his sneakers. The brother who'd dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Who'd been fired from 3 jobs in the past year for not showing up. Who Mom still called my sensitive boy, despite the fact he was a grown-ass man living rent-free in their basement. "And what's the plan now?" I asked. "How do I go to college?" That's when my mom delivered the line that would change everything between us forever. "Maybe college isn't the right path for everyone, honey. You're smart. You could start working, build experience instead. Jake needed this chance to get back on his feet. You need to be a good sister and support what's best for this family." A good sister. Like my future was just a chip to be sacrificed in the game of keeping Jake comfortable. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded, stood up, and went to my room. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of not just my life, but theirs too. I just didn't know it yet. Updated. Guys, I'm absolutely floored by the support on this post. Some of you asked why I didn't just scream at them or call the police. Truth is, I was in shock. Have you ever had that moment where your brain just disconnects from reality because what's happening is too messed up to process? My parents' favoritism toward Jake didn't come out of nowhere. It was a slow-burn disaster I should have seen coming years ago. Looking back, the signs were there since elementary school, when Jake's C- math tests earned him celebratory ice cream trips, while my straight A's were met with, "That's what we expect from you." Jake was always the sensitive one, the boy, who needed extra understanding. When he got caught shoplifting at 15, Mom said he was acting out because he feels unseen. When I got caught staying out past curfew at 16, the one and only time, I was grounded for a month and told I should know better. Different rules, different expectations. By high school, the dynamic was set in stone. Jake's failures were temporary setbacks. My achievements were the bare minimum. He got a used Jeep Cherokee for his 16th birthday after failing 3 classes. I got a fossil watch for getting into the National Honor Society. But the college fund betrayal? That was next level. Even for them. That was them saying, plain as day, that Jake's bad decisions would always outrank my good ones. The day after the family meeting, I woke up at 5 a.m. and did something I'd never done before. I started planning my escape. First call, Penn State. Financial aid office. I explained my situation in clinical terms like I was describing someone else's life. The counselor on the phone made sympathetic noises but ultimately said what I expected. It was too late for new financial aid packages this semester. My second call was to Dr. Wilson, my AP physics teacher who'd written my college recommendation letters. I'd babysat her kids for 3 years, and she'd always told me to call if I needed anything. This definitely qualified as anything. Over breakfast at IHOP, neutral territory, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said 7 words that would save my future. I know someone at Princeton who owes me. Princeton. The school I dreamed about but never applied to because it seemed unreachable even with my perfect GPA and extracurriculars. The cosmic joke was that it might now be my only option. Back home, my parents were acting like nothing had happened. Mom asked if I wanted to go back to school shopping like we'd planned months ago. Dad mentioned casually that they could help me look for a nice starter apartment instead of a dorm. Jake was conveniently absent, probably sleeping off whatever he'd been doing the night before. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things while secretly sending emails, making calls, and preparing application materials for Princeton's last chance admissions round. Dr. Wilson's contact had given me 48 hours to submit everything. I didn't sleep for 2 nights straight. On day 3, while Mom was at her Pilates class and Dad was at work, I packed 2 suitcases with everything that mattered to me. I withdrew the $4,367.28 I'd saved from my waitressing job. My parents didn't know about this account and called an Uber. I left a note on my bed that simply said, "I'm figuring something out. Don't worry about me." Dr. Wilson let me crash in her guest room while I waited to hear from Princeton. 7 excruciating days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The admissions director herself was calling to tell me I'd been granted emergency admission with a full academic scholarship, provided I could start immediately and maintain a 3.8 GPA. I cried for the first time since this all began, right there on Dr. Wilson's floral guest bed. The scholarship wouldn't cover everything. Room and board, books, living expenses were still on me, but it was a lifeline I hadn't dared to hope for. My parents called and texted nonstop once they realized I was truly gone. I answered briefly, told them I was safe and had figured something out like Mom had suggested. When I mentioned Princeton, my dad actually laughed and said I was being ridiculous. "Come home and we'll talk about realistic options," he said. I hung up and didn't call back. 2 days later, I moved into Princeton's emergency housing, a converted study lounge I shared with 2 other late admission students. I got a job at the campus coffee shop, plus weekend shifts at a bar in town. Using a fake ID Dr. Wilson's daughter had passed down to me, another secret I'll take to my grave. Between those jobs and taking extra credits each semester, I barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the family that had thrown away my future. I only went home once at Thanksgiving, and it was a disaster. Jake wasn't there, off with friends again, and my parents alternated between guilt-tripping me about abandoning the family in a time of need and acting impressed by my Princeton acceptance in a way that felt hollow. Mom actually had the nerve to ask if my scholarship money could be partially redirected to help with family expenses, since I was already getting free school. I left the next morning and never spent another night in that house. By Christmas, I'd started hearing rumblings through extended family that things weren't going well at home. Jake had borrowed Mom's car and totaled it. Dad's contracting business was struggling after he'd taken out additional loans, presumably to cover more of Jake's financial difficulties. I felt a cold satisfaction I wasn't proud of, but couldn't deny either. The real bombshell dropped during spring break of my first year. Aunt Karen called to tell me my parents had lost their house, the house I'd grown up in, with the tree fort Dad built, and the height marks on the kitchen door frame. Foreclosed. They'd moved into a small apartment near Jake's new job, which I'd apparently been fired from 2 weeks after Aunt Karen's call. They'd asked Karen for money, which was why she was calling me. "They're saying it's all because they had to spend your college fund on emergency medical bills for Jake," she said, confusion clear in her voice. "That doesn't sound right to me. Jake looks fine whenever I see him." "It wasn't medical bills," I said quietly, then told her everything. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Aunt Karen said, "I'm cutting my check to you, not them," and hung up. 2 days later, I received $5,000 with a note that said, "For books and whatever else you need. I'm proud of you." That money changed everything. I could finally breathe a little, cut back on some work hours, and focus more on school. I landed a coveted summer internship at Goldman Sachs that paid enough to cover my expenses for the following semester. I was building my life brick by brick, without any support from the people who should have been my foundation. Meanwhile, the updates from home grew increasingly dire. Dad's business finally went under. Jake was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, then again for something no one would specify. Mom had to take a job at Walmart after 20 years as a stay-at-home parent. Through it all, no one contacted me directly, except to occasionally ask if I could help out financially. I ignored those requests and focused on survival. I had roommates now, real ones, in an actual apartment off campus that we split 4 ways. I had maintained my 3.9 GPA despite working 30-plus hours a week. I had professors who respected me, friends who supported me, and a clear path forward that nobody could reallocate. Then, during the fall semester of my junior year, the text arrived that would bring everything full circle. Updated. Reading through. These comments has been emotional. So many of you have experienced family betrayal too. Several people asked what happened to Jake during those years. Short answer, he got worse before he got better. Did you ever notice how enablers never actually help the person they're protecting? It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when my phone buzzed. I was still up, cramming for a financial derivatives exam, running on Red Bull and pure stubbornness. The text was from a number I didn't recognize. Sam, it's Dad. Using Mom's friend's phone. Need to talk. Emergency. My first instinct was to ignore it. This wouldn't be the first emergency they'd invented to guilt me. But something felt different this time. I called the number. My father answered immediately, his voice cracking with what sounded like genuine distress. Sam? Thank God. We didn't know who else to call. What's going on? I kept my voice neutral, protective barriers firmly in place. We're living in the car. He was crying now, actually crying. In 21 years, I'd never heard my father cry. It's been 3 weeks. The apartment. We couldn't make rent after Jake. He stopped abruptly, like he'd realized he was about to cross some invisible line. After Jake what, Dad? A long silence then. After Jake took the last of our savings and disappeared. There it was, the predictable conclusion to their years of enabling. The son they'd sacrificed everything for, including me, had finally taken everything they had left and vanished. Where are you now? I asked, already knowing I'd regret whatever happened next. Walmart parking lot on Route 9. They let people stay overnight. Mom was crying in the background. I could hear the desperation, the humiliation in both their voices. These proud, stubborn people who'd thrown away my future were now sleeping in their Honda Civic, using the Walmart bathroom to brush their teeth. I should have felt vindicated. Some small, wounded part of me did. But mostly I just felt tired, and sad, and weirdly responsible, even though logic told me I wasn't. I can send you enough for a week at the Holiday Inn, I said finally. But I need you both to understand something. This is not me coming back. This is not forgiveness. This is just me not wanting you to freeze to death while I figure out what I'm willing to do next. Dad started to protest. Something about family. Sticking together. But Mom shushed him. She knew. She finally understood that the daughter they'd discarded wasn't coming back to rescue them. At least not on their terms. I Venmo'd them $700. Money I'd been saving for a spring break trip with friends. Enough for 7 nights at a budget hotel, some basic food, and essential toiletries. Then I sat on my bed until sunrise, wondering what kind of person I was becoming. Hard enough to let them suffer? Soft enough to still care? Both felt like losing in different ways. The next day, I skipped classes for the first time in my college career and drove the 2 hours to see them. I needed to assess the situation with my own eyes, to make decisions based on reality rather than guilt or anger. The Holiday Inn looked exactly like every other Holiday Inn in America. My parents looked like strangers, thinner, grayer, hollow-eyed versions of the confident people who'd once told me my dreams weren't worth protecting. Dad had a scraggly beard he'd never had before. Mom's hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual perfect blowout. We sat in their room, the awkwardness thick enough to cut with a knife. They started with apologies, so many apologies, all mixed with excuses and justifications. Jake had manipulated them. They thought they were doing the right thing. They never imagined it would come to this. I listened without interrupting, letting them empty their reservoir of explanations. When they finally ran out of words, I asked the question that had been haunting me for almost 3 years. Would you do it again? If you could go back to that day, knowing everything that would happen, would you still take my college fund to bail out Jake? The silence was my answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. You're still not sorry you did it. You're just sorry it didn't work out the way you hoped. Mom started crying again. Dad stared at his hands. I'm not going to give you money, I said, but I will help you rebuild, with conditions. I laid out my terms. First, they would apply for every assistance program available. Pride be damned. Second, they would attend financial literacy classes at the community center. Third, when, not if, Jake resurfaced, They would not give him money or a place to stay unless he agreed to addiction treatment, because let's face it, gambling wasn't his only problem. But he's our son, Mom whispered. And I'm your daughter, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. You chose him over me once. I won't let you do it again, not even to yourselves. They agreed because they had no choice. I found them a small studio apartment with a 6-month lease I co-signed. I arranged interviews at places that wouldn't immediately dismiss 60-somethings with spotty recent work history. I did all this, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I refused to become as callous as they had been. 2 weeks after I'd set them up in their new place, Jake called me. Not them, me. He'd been in Atlantic City again, then AC had turned into Vegas, and Vegas had turned into rock bottom. He was broke, homeless, and finally ready to admit he needed help. Mom and Dad lost everything because of me, he said, his voice hollow with the weight of that realization. And you, Sam, what they did to you. He trailed off, unable to find words adequate for the magnitude of the betrayal. That's between me and them, I said. What matters now is what you're going to do next. I don't know how to stop. He admitted, the first honest thing I'd heard him say in years. I made him the same offer I'd made our parents. Help with conditions, not cash without accountability. To my surprise, he accepted. That was 8 months ago. Jake's now 60 days into a residential treatment program for gambling addiction, a program I researched but our parents paid for by selling their remaining assets. Mom works at a doctor's office doing administrative work. Dad delivers packages for Amazon. They're not comfortable, but they're not in their car, and they're finally, painfully learning that rescuing Jake from consequences was never the same as actually helping him, as. For me, I'll graduate from Princeton next spring with a degree in financial management and a job already lined up at a firm that specializes in protecting assets for young people from exploitative family situations. The irony isn't lost on me. I still don't have Sunday dinners with my parents. I don't know if I ever will, but I did have coffee with them last weekend, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I needed to check my bank accounts immediately afterward. Sometimes, the family you're born into fails you so spectacularly that you have no choice but to build something entirely new from the wreckage. So that's what I'm doing, one careful brick at a time. Updated. This story has reached so many more people than I ever expected. Thank you for all the messages of support and for sharing your own experiences. Several people have asked if I could have prevented the whole situation by alerting my grandparents, who started the college fund. They passed away when I was in high school. Otherwise, I definitely would have turned to them. Would you have tried to maintain a relationship with parents who betrayed you like this, or would you have cut ties completely?